8 months ago, I was looking for a job when a friend of mine told me there was a receptionist vacancy at the hotel she was working at. I gave no second thoughts about it. When I found which hotel it was, I'd recognized it immediately. It was a really old hotel and was inaugurated when my grandpa was a child. Apparently 3 years ago, it was bought and reopened. At first, I was hired for the afternoon shift. I was there for around 3 weeks. The only weird thing was that sometimes I heard someone calling my name when I was alone in the hallway. Nothing very worrying, but then came the opportunity and the night shifter quit. I suffer from insomnia, so the idea of making use of that dead time was really tempting. And then it started. The first weird thing was the hallway on the second floor. The lights turned on and off in a rhythm. They work with motion sensors too. I thought they were failing. I called the electrician, but he told me that there was no problem, apparently. This just happens between 2300 and 0600 to 0700, and not every day. The other thing that I noticed was that you could hear some whispers at night. Sometimes really far away, and sometimes just next to your ear. I am in the reception room in the night. Next to me is the dining room. Next to that is the restroom. And just then is the first room. So they aren't close enough to be the voices of any guests. Noises in the kitchen, the roof, and the boiler room are common enough that I don't even look anymore. It's normal to hear someone hitting something in those rooms, but it doesn't matter how many times I looked there, I never found a thing. Doors opening and closing on empty rooms are not that regular, and I just closed them with the key to stop them. I never asked anyone about it until 2 months later. I was walking on the first floor looking for any problem or noise. I tend to do this around 1 a.m. when there are problematic customers or just too many people. Then all the lights on the first floor turned off. The sensors weren't working, and my cell phone was in the reception area. And then it happened. At the end of the hallway, I could see the shape of a person. It was pitch black, and it was looking in the VIP room. I froze there and just walked away. There wasn't anyone on the first floor other than me. In the morning, I asked my coworker about it, and she told me, "Did you see the shadow man?" I was like, what the hell? So apparently, everyone knew about the poltergeist, but no one thought that a warning was necessary. Just a few days later, I was in the kitchen with one of the cooks talking about the lunch of the day, and every cooking pot and cutting board just flew away off its place. We just stared at each other without any explanation about what we just saw. And the paranormal activity became so normal that everybody just called the ghost my friend, due to the fact that everyone joked about how it was my only company at night. Working here is really weird and surreal at times, but I still love my job. When I was little, my parents rented this house. It used to be a security house used by Narcos, where they kept kidnapped people. We found this out years after moving out, as it came out in the newspaper at that time. It had 2 facades, 2 entries completely different, ended on different streets as well. One entry was blue and the other was beige. It also had 2 different numbers, a lot of bedrooms, all of the mirrors were broken, and I mean all of them, and all the locks were outside the rooms. And they told my parents that it was because the owner of the house had small children. It had an inside pool, but we never used it as it felt strange. It wasn't deep enough as well. It was just a room with a pool in it, with no windows in the room. The house was huge, to be honest. We stayed 1 year in that house, and it was awful. My sister and I, at the time 10 and 8, were the ones that stayed more in the house with my mom. My dad traveled a lot for work, and when he was there, nothing would ever happen. My mom also never felt or saw anything. I never slept alone. It felt like someone was watching me all the time. My sister began to speak to someone there. I caught her talking to it several times, but she denied it. One day, she screamed in the shower, and when my mom went to see what was going on, she had scratches all over her back. And this happened to me too, but I didn't feel them. I just saw that I had them in the mirror when I would use the same bathroom, but didn't say anything. I don't know why, and just kept quiet about it. We never used that bathroom again. One night, we were watching TV in the living room, and my mom called us to bed. We got up and I turned off the TV. When we were at the stairs, the TV turned back on. I went back to the living room to turn it off. When I turned, I saw a black shadow in the kitchen staring at me. It had a humanoid form, like a very big man. I just stared at it, as you could see through him. It had a human form. He just kept staring at me with a defensive posture. I do not know how to describe it. Suddenly, my sister took my arm and told me in a dead serious tone, "Do not look at him." And that's when I understood I was seeing a ghost. We ran as fast as we could to my room. My mom checked it out, but there was no one in the house, just the three of us. To this day, my sister doesn't want to talk about it. It was horrible. You could just be doing your homework in the dining room and suddenly you would hear a man screaming like they were killing him in a horrible way. It echoed through all the walls. We cried a lot to move out of that house, but we were new in the city. My mom never really didn't have any money to move out without my dad. Those are a few stories I have of that house. I have a few more I do not want to remember, to be honest. I just kept them closed in my memories. So let me tell you a few more of my experiences. The strange thing is that all of these things didn't happen all the time. We were fine for a couple of days, even weeks, and then something would happen. I remember we could be playing in one of the rooms and suddenly you will have the urge to leave that room immediately. Both of us would get out of the room as fast as we could without saying anything to each other. We just ran at the same time. I haven't felt that feeling again. I think I could describe like if you were the prey of something. Another thing, this is somehow harsh to remember. My dad on one of his trips bought or found a turtle. I don't remember if he found it, to be honest. He took it home and he gave it to me as a gift. I was happy as I've always wanted to have a turtle. We went to the pet store to buy it a fish tank and everything. And that same week, on Sunday, my mom woke me up and I went to feed my turtle. I always did that first thing in the morning. I remember I fed her and closed the door of my room. I always closed it as we had a cat and the fish tank didn't have a roof on it. And double checked it as well. I went downstairs to have breakfast with my family. After that, when I went up to the second floor, I saw my door was open. And that was strange as I was the first one to come up. I went to my room scared for my turtle because of my cat. I was relieved to see my cat wasn't there. However, when I went to see my turtle, she was crushed. Something had crushed my turtle. I do not know how to describe it. And it's a bit blurry in my head. But it was like someone had stepped on it. She was on the same rock I had left her. I don't remember much. I remember my dad heard my screams and ran out to my bedroom. And they always told me it was the cat, or that she dug and a rock had fallen on her. But I don't know, to be honest. Even as a kid, I knew cats don't do that. They always go for the necks. This was different. She was on top of that rock, not under it. I will never know what happened to her. I've never had another turtle or reptile, and I don't plan on having one in the future either. You know that feeling when you are running up the stairs and you feel you are being chased? We also felt that, but we thought it was the normal feeling everyone had. One day, we ran up to the stairs with that feeling, and on the second floor, we entered a room immediately where my cat was. She started to growl at the door behind us. It was like she was seeing another cat. Even when we went behind her, she would keep growling at the door until she was fine again. We loved that cat. She lived with us for 19 years. She was a fierce one, so no one touched her, not even ghosts. I do believe cats protect you from evil things. When we were scared, she would sleep with us. I miss her. She was so caring. I know that my sister got the worst of that house, but seriously, she doesn't want to talk about her experiences. Life goes on and you tend to forget these kinds of things after all. So a lot of paranormal experiences happened at my house. My family used to get it blessed and have the energy cleansed, but it never worked, and now I'm starting to think maybe that's because it's not the house itself that's haunted, but the whole neighborhood. My neighborhood is a little weird. It goes around a lake, and there is quite a distance between some houses and my sister's, and I used to love to take drives around the lake because it was beautiful. But we don't anymore because of what happened last time. It was pretty late and dark outside, and we were only halfway around the lake when my sister was driving. Danny suddenly stopped the car, and the energy around us changed. I thought I was the only one who felt it, so I ignored it and asked Danny why she had stopped the car. She kept her eye on the road ahead of us and said, "Do you guys see that lady too?" We all looked around, but I personally didn't see anything at the time. But one of my others, M, asked, "Is she blonde and wearing?" and described what the lady looked like. Danny nodded and M said, "Yeah, I've seen her around the neighborhood before. You shouldn't have stopped because now she's going to follow us." Danny immediately started driving again, but a few minutes later she started speeding up and said, "I just saw her again." She kept seeing her over and over and over, and eventually she turned off the road and headed towards a different lake. She never saw the lady while we went to this new lake. It's like as soon as we left the neighborhood, she left us alone. The next day I went to the post office with my, at the time, boyfriend, and while we were waiting in line, I noticed a missing poster hanging on the wall. I took a closer look at it and saw a lady, the same lady that was described perfectly by M. She went missing in my neighborhood, and apparently she has been missing for 11 years. My best friend was over for a sleepover. She's the same one from the experience with the lady around the lake. We had just settled down for bed and were lying on little mats on the floor, and after a few minutes of silence, I heard my friend start to mutter a prayer under her breath. My friend is not religious, so I immediately knew something was off. I heard her whisper, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave me alone." And as soon as she said that, I heard what sounded like hands and feet slapping against the floor and heading in my direction, like someone was crawling towards me. I froze in fear and felt it crawl onto the mattress I was on. I could feel the indents as it made its way up towards me. I was too scared to turn to see what it was. But soon, I could feel something leaning down into the side of my face, like it was staring at me. The energy of this thing felt awful. It was one of the worst feelings I have ever felt. After about a minute, I worked up the courage to turn around to face it. But as soon as I did, the presence and the indents disappeared, along with the awful energy I was feeling. The next day, I mentioned it to my friend and she said, "I'm sorry. I was trying to get it to leave me alone, not send it to you." Whatever it was came back a second time when my friend wasn't there and did the same thing. A little while after my family had someone who is very in tune with the spirit world stay with us for about a week, and she told us that there were lots of spirits in the house, but there is one in particular that is stronger than the others. I'm guessing that this was that one. I haven't had this happen a third time, and I really hope it doesn't. So my family owns some property down at the lake for camping that is completely gated. The gate is old and very loud, so no person or animal could open it or climb it without being heard. There's also little rocks all around the tent, so no one can walk around the property without being heard, as there's always a loud crunch to their steps. My friend, same one from the other stories, and my little sister decided that they wanted to go camping down at the lake. I don't know why the hell we decided to do that after everything, but we did. The lake also has no Wi-Fi or phone service, so we downloaded a couple movies on my friend's phone to watch. We drove down to the lake and parked on the other side of the gate because vehicles can't really fit well on the actual property. While we were closing the gate behind us, we noticed someone walking across the street from us. It's not unusual for people to take walks around the lake. We actually see it a lot around here. But this person had a strange vibe, and I think my friend and sister noticed it too, because they quickly shut the gate and asked if I had brought my protection crystals. I have a few and usually keep them under my pillow, but this time I laid them around the inside of the tent. Around 12 a.m. we were still watching movies when there was a very loud sound right next to my head from the outside of the tent. It was a sound I had never really heard before, and the best way I can describe it was a growl. My friend quickly paused the movie and everything went quiet and still. We had some lanterns on in the tent, but everyone was too scared to move to grab them. We waited a moment, and we heard the growl again. I slowly started to sit up as my friend and sister started to look at me. I could tell they wanted to start yelling and calling for help to our neighbors, who happened to be camping right next door. I shook my head at them and whispered to them to be quiet and still, because I had no idea what was outside the tent. We get cougars around here, but only very rarely, but this didn't sound anything like a cougar. We heard whatever was outside start to circle around the tent, and my friend whispered to me to call for help. I told her no again, and that we needed to be quiet, so she grabbed my sister's hand, and they started quietly praying again. My friend is not religious, but she always ended up praying while she was with us. My sister took her phone out and slowly started to crawl around the tent in hopes of finding a spot that gave her some service. As she was doing this, whatever was outside started to press against the tent, as if to see how much strength it would take to get into it. My sister managed to get the tiniest bit of service on her phone and started texting our parents, friends, and sister to get someone to get us, but no one replied. Eventually, one of her friends ended up responding and called our parents, but they didn't pick up, so they called our older sister, and she actually picked up. My sister's friend texted us shortly after and told us that our sister was on her way to come get us. We heard whatever was outside find the entrance to the tent. Our tent actually had 2 zippers to get inside. One was a netted screen and the other was to get into the actual tent. It started fumbling around with the zipper right as my older sister's car pulled up. The headlights shone through the tent, but there was no shadow on the other side of the tent. It was like whatever was there had disappeared. We heard my older sister open the gate, and we immediately exited the tent and ran to her and the car, and she drove away as quickly as she could. When we got home, we started discussing what happened, and apparently no one had heard anything open or climb the gate, nor had anyone heard anything walking towards the tent before the growling noise, and no one saw or heard it leave when my sister had pulled up to get us. We also talked about the person we had seen before. We closed the gate, and it turns out we all saw something different. My friend had seen a short man with short hair. I saw a tall woman with long hair. My sister said she couldn't even make out what she had seen. And this could have just been our minds remembering it wrong, because of what had happened after, but I personally don't think it was. The next day, we went back to the lake to collect everything we had left behind in our hurry to get away. Our phones, crystals, etc. We decided to check around the tent for any footsteps that might have been left. There were bare human footprints going all the way around the tent, but there were none heading towards or leading away from the tent. It was as if whatever it was had just appeared and disappeared. We also had left a ton of snacks out on the table. That was a good distance away from the tent. Any animal that managed to get inside the property would have gone for the food and tried to avoid the humans. But this thing went straight for the tent with people in it. The food was perfectly untouched the next day. My sister and I don't camp anymore, and anytime my parents have friends with kids over to camp, my sister and I take the kids to the house to sleep, because we're always worried about whatever was outside our tent will come back one day. My 3 youngest sisters all share a room, and it's right above mine, so I can hear them every time they're up at night. A few months ago, I woke up to one of them crying and checked the time. It was around 12 a.m. I could tell which one was crying and decided to try and ignore it to see if she would just fall back asleep, because this sister in particular is a big-time drama queen and will cry about anything and everything. After a while, she didn't stop, so I went upstairs to check on her. When I got to the top of the stairs, she was standing outside her room and she looked terrified. I asked her why she was crying and if she was okay, and at first she didn't answer. She just sat and cried. Eventually, after I asked a few times, she told me that she woke up because she needed to go to the bathroom. But when she got up, there was a man standing in the corner of her room. I immediately went into the room to check for the man my sister told me about and to see if my other sisters were okay. The others were perfectly sound asleep, and other than them, there was no one else in the room. I walked my sister to the bathroom, and when she was finished, I walked her back to her room, but she refused to go back in. After a while, I managed to get her in and asked if the man was still in there. She said no and climbed into bed. I asked her what the man was doing when she saw him, and she said that he was just standing in the corner staring at her and them while they were sleeping. And this scared me, but I waited for her to fall asleep before leaving. I left the light on in the room when I did. I mentioned to my parents the next day, but they said it was just her mind playing tricks on her because she was probably half asleep when she saw him. I went along with that until the next day it happened again. For the next couple weeks, All of my sisters who slept in that room absolutely refused to go to bed at night. They refused to even go into the room at night because apparently, according to all three of them every night, there was a man standing in the corner of their room. We left all the lights on for them at night, but my parents are kind of strict and made them sleep in the room anyway. After a few weeks, they stopped talking about the man in the corner and went to bed with no problem. So I don't know if the man decided to finally leave, or if they just got used to him being there. But I hate going in their room now. It always has a creepy feeling like someone is watching you. I feel bad that I couldn't help them more, but they seemed happy that I would stay with them until they fell asleep. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.